The King of the Copper Mountains is a book I totally didn't steal from my primary school's library. Technically speaking, they were getting rid of a load of old books and that was on the pile, and I knew no one else would appreciate it, so I just slipped it into my bag. That's not stealing, that's rescuing. Originally titled Het Slutelkruid, which I've probably just butchered, The King of the Copper Mountains won the Netherlands' Best Children's Book in the year it was published, 1964. It's an amazing, beautiful children's story. Sort of reminds me of Arabian Nights, but with more of a Nordic spin. The eponymous king, after a 1,000-year-long reign, is dying of his heart failing, and the only thing that will cure it is the medicine which the doctor who attends upon him goes to go and collect. To keep his heart beating for the few nights that he's away, the rabbit servant who attends upon the king calls upon all the animals of his kingdom to tell him exciting stories every night, all in hopes of keeping his heart beating just that extra night more. If you find yourself in the market for a children's book, I can't recommend this one enough. In fact, you really should do yourselves a favour and go get it. It's only about £6, and that's if you're looking for a really nice edition. And I'm just desperate for more people to have heard of this lovely, lovely story. As for stealing, sorry not sorry.
Sometimes it's fun to learn while you read, not just reading for pleasure, but also reading to educate yourself. So from our textbooks section, I offer Westwood and Simpson's The Law of the Land, Guide to England's Legends. If you enjoy mythology, ghost stories, and history, I would definitely recommend this very heavy book. I mean that with all seriousness, I thought it was going to break the table. The Law of the Land breaks down England and many parts of the United Kingdom into its constituent sections, much as we do with our maps, breaking it down into shires and smaller regions. From there, it uses a series of keys, symbols, and easily identifiable markers to give very easily identifiable information on all the different places you may want to visit on your ghost hunting expeditions. And just for a bit of fun, let's show where I'm from, where Jenny's from, and areas of two of our favourite TikTokers are from. Derbyshire, Leicestershire, Oxfordshire and Surrey. You can see Derbyshire is covered. No surprise, one of the most haunted places in Europe. Leicestershire, again, famous stories such as Jenny Greenteeth mark it as one of the most haunted areas in England as well. Oxfordshire, apparently, when property in the afterlife is expensive, with most stories of highwaymen. Apparently everyone's trying to get out of Surrey, even the dead. A great book if you love history. It's time for a new segment, BookTok Storytime. So today at work I was on one-to-one. For those of you who don't know, I am a healthcare professional, and one-to-one means that a patient requires one-to-one care. Now, a patient can be on one-to-one care for any number of reasons. They're a falls risk, they're a flight risk, they are confused, they are scared. There is a long list of reasons, but basically what it means is you stick to them like glue. Now, of course, that does mean that if a patient were to threaten you with whatever means they have at their disposal, you do still have to stay with them. But luckily, as a larger male member of staff, that only happens to me about 60 to 70% of the time. Unlike most medical practitioners who are smaller or female, it only happens about 95% of the time. But that's getting off topic. This patient that I was with wanted to go out quite regularly for smokes, fresh air. I don't mind. Went out with the patient. It's my job. Mostly made pleasant conversation. Most of the time he didn't want to talk to me. Just happy to be off the ward. And almost every time we go out, I see the same person sat out with a vape, reading the same book. And I particularly notice this person because they have very cool hair. And that makes me think they're probably reading an interesting book. On one of the visits, I see them, and I spot that the book has a very interesting cover that I don't recognise, and now I'm intrigued. Obviously, I'm at work, and B, I'm not a creep. I don't approach anyone in public, especially not someone who is reading and minding their own business. That's called being polite. Also British. But I really wanted to know what that book was. But I let it go. Clearly the book fate smiled upon me because I saw them getting a coffee sometime later, and I mentioned that I'd seen them outside, and they were with someone as well, so I felt a bit more comfortable approaching. Mentioned I'd seen them outside, mentioned that their book looked interesting, and they were clearly very interested in it, and I really wanted to know what the name was. The book, if you're curious, was Flowers in the Attic by Virginia Andrews. Now, I'm pretty certain we have a copy, but I will be checking when I get inside. And if we don't have a copy, I will be buying a copy, because any book that is recommended that vehemently by someone with that interesting a hair colour knows what they're talking about. I'm also making this video for another reason. They mentioned that they were on TikTok. I also mentioned that I'm on TikTok. If you wind up coming across this video, hi! Thanks for the book recommendation. Now, I would like everyone who has watched to this point in the video to stitch this or reference it in some way. Just reply with your interesting books related story. How books bring people together, how books introduce nerds, and how you just got a really good book recommendation completely apropos of nothing. See ya.
Show me a fantasy book that's on your TBR. Show me a fantasy book that you're currently reading. And show me a fantasy book that you absolutely loved.
Oof. Coffee reserves severely depleted. Tea supply is only adequate for a basic British family. We'll need a new bag of that. Yorkshire tea, of course. Baby still on the premises. Short term. It's okay. Books existing outside of library premises. And library severely over capacity with lack of organisation. And a wannabe content creator severely lacking in time or availability to perform a live. So, as you all know, we just hit 1,000 followers. And as I said in the video, linked below, when we hit 1,000 followers, we will do a library tour. In said library tour video, I also stated we would not be able to do a library tour until at the earliest September. I'll be completely honest, I never expected us to get even above 100 followers. I have spent a large amount of time trying to get any level of social media presence. And as it turned out, what I needed was a platform where I did small videos with my wife, focusing on just having fun rather than trying to emulate other people and other content creators. So thank you. Thank you for acknowledging and wanting to join us on this little slice of our own paradise. It's books, it's D&D, it's games, and it's our family. And thank you for joining us, and thank you for... honestly, thank you, seriously. Now, just because we can't do the live stream until the end of September, and the reason for that is quite simple, my current job doesn't allow me to really organise and book things with much freedom. People who work in healthcare will understand. But as of mid-September, I am changing my job for something with more regular hours. So we'll be setting the date for the 24th, the last Saturday of September, and we'll be starting the live stream sometime before 12 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time, and we'll just kind of go all day. And what the live stream will entail is us going through our library, reorganising it, resorting it, putting everything on new shelves, and kind of talking about some of our books, answering any questions that you may have. So please, start sending us questions, or get some questions ready that you want answered. We're really looking forward to it. But between now and then, we will be doing some, I guess, hype videos is what I'm going to call them, because we need more coffee than we currently have to do a full library organise. And whereas the Tea Witch has nice tea, we are book talkers. We are people that like books. We have good coffee. We will also need to organise babysitting for our daughter, because it'll be difficult to organise things with a baby in the house. That's fine, not a problem. And we need more shelves. So look forward to the next few weeks as we show you us just getting ready for this live. Can't wait.
I picked this one up on a bit of a whim, not thinking it was going to be as good as it actually is. I really thought it was going to be another one of these ones where when you start reading it you start going, oh, look how outdated, how funny all of this is. And then I started genuinely reading it, and actually this one's really good. The only bits of advice I can find that are that outdated are some of the advices on contraception, and that's only because it's way better now. The majority of it is a lot more female empowerment based. Though the titles of all the chapters give you the impression that it's going to be, oh, how to make him feel good. It's all really about female empowerment and you feeling good, as well as a few slightly problematic bits of advice about how to manipulate, but we'll breeze past that, we'll breeze past it. a big thing in this book is actually more about making yourself feel confident and good about yourself, because then you will have more fun. Although one author is credited, it's actually written basically by her, but she wrote up a lot of the stories and advice of her female friends. Now I think about it, it's kind of like having Sex in the City, but as printed format. Oh, I just noticed here the part where it says how to diet. If you read a lot closer, it actually says about throwing a celebration party for your own body. This is what I mean, all of the chapters and subheadings make you think it's going to be quite damaging and old-fashioned advice, and actually, it's all really quite forward-thinking and positive. This might genuinely be one that I would recommend as an actual advice book. So, yeah, if you're into this kind of thing, genuinely get it, have a read through. It's really funny, and just really good advice.
I scan thy features, calm and white, beneath the single taper's light. The dark, frigid lids behind whose screen are eyes that view not earth's demesne. And as I look, I fain would know the paths whereon thy dream steps go, the spectral realms that thou canst see with eyes veiled from the world and me. For I have likewise gazed in sleep on things my memory scarce can keep, and from half-knowing long to spy again the scenes before thine eye. I too have known the peaks of Thok, the vales of Pnath, where dream shapes flock, the vaults of Zin, and well I trove why thou demand'st the taper's glow. But what is this that suddenly slips over thy false and bearded lips? What fear distracts thy mind and heart, that drops must from thy forehead start? Old vision wake, thine opening eyes gleam black with clouds of other skies, and as from some demoniac sight I flee into the haunted night. That poem was To a Dreamer by the Gentleman of Providence, better known as H.P. Lovecraft. Lovecraft is probably one of the most prolific and problematic writers of any century. His thoughts, feelings and opinions backwards even for the day that he wrote in. But sadly for such a haunted and wrong individual, he wrote some of the most amazing works of fiction to ever be put to print. Like Tolkien and Shakespeare before him, he defined an entire genre, eldritch horror, the unknowable unknown, a dreamscape of absolute horror. But just because we can enjoy a work of fiction, or a beautifully haunting poem, does not mean that we should forgive a Jacob Rees-Mogg lookalike. And with eyes now open, it is to us to correct the mistakes of the past. Lovecraft, Rowling and Hemingway need correcting and answering, but The Watch is a travesty, and less about rings.
Okay, we're going to leave the main library now and go get something special from Olivia's shelf in her own little room. In a moment you'll see it properly. I painted that mural on the wall for her when I was pregnant with her. There's a dragon in the hills and there's a dragon in her book. This is Dragon Post. It was bought for, well, me at the time, last Christmas, in reference to our D&D game where we turned the kobolds from pests to a postal service. The book itself is a quite simple, nice story for children with lots of these lovely little pull-out pieces. Very reminiscent of the Jolly Postman or any of the Dragonology etc. series. It follows the really nice story of a little boy trying to get some advice about the dragon that he found living under his house. It's just such a nice story, especially if you like dragons.
Gossip, hearsay and rumour are not a 20th or 21st century invention, and neither are overly opinionated mothers, wives, sisters, husbands, fathers, sons. A little history lesson. In 1709, Mrs. Phoebe Crackenthorpe, real name, a lady who knows everything and is in everyone's business, and simply known nowadays as a lady of leisure, had so very much gossip to spread about her London friends and associates that she took to a printing press and 5 weeks later published the first issue of The Genuine Female Tattler. In Mrs. Crackenthorpe's time, there were many pretenders, one even running for 25 issues, where they both spat venom and vitriol at each other. But this is the edited, genuine female tattler, the one coined by Mrs. Crackenthorpe. It is exactly what you think it is, and it is probably one of the funniest books that I own. It's this wonderful window into life in the 1700s that perfectly mirrors our own life. Never mind the works of Shakespeare or anything else from any era, this is a genuine history book that I think people should read. Because if nothing else besides how funny it is and how vitriolic and catty some of the stories get, it really does show that no matter what era, what age, and what time, people will always be people, and people will always be in each other's business. And even in the time of romance, men asked for rude fit.
This is one of those series where I don't know if I'm just missing all the other people who've read it, or if it's really, really unknown and it's a bit of a hidden gem. Either way, this is Kodacha, Sana's Stage. It's one of the first mangas I ever read in full. Only 10 volumes long, which is quite short, as I'm sure people who collect manga know. It follows the story of Sana, a child actress in Japan, and on a surface level it looks very slice of life. From the covers you'd think there's nothing substantial here, just a nice girly little manga. It's actually dealing with quite a lot of serious mental health issues, and it deals with them relatively realistically. Really good example of not what it says on the tin. Oh, there's also a nice love story interwoven with it if you like that sort of thing.
When you think horror, you don't think children's books. Or if those two thoughts do come to mind, you might think of Darren Shan and the Demonata series. My first foray into horror came from my older brother. And it's a pop-up book series. The Mini Monster Pop-Up Book series by Ted Smart. I genuinely loved these books when I was a child, and I hope that Olivia will enjoy them just as much as I did. The box set contains 4 books in the Deep Dark Dungeon, The Horrors of Howling Hall, The Mystery of Maggoty Mill, and The Weirdies of Wailing Wood. Now, if you're thinking that these are going to be lovely and quite funny and very silly, you are right, but I will not be showing some of my favourite scenes, particularly the last page of The Mystery of Maggoty Mill, which was always one of my favourites. And I won't be showing that because even by the standards of adult books, it gets quite graphic. But if you're a bit goth and you have kids, I really recommend. Weirdies of Wailing Wood, a mini monster pop-up book by Ted Smart. Do hiking and jogging make you feel good? Then come for a run through Wailing Wood. You'll meet some nice beasties who love a good race. If branches start snapping, just speed up your pace. You've no time to waste as you rush down dark trails. Don't stop to listen to those blood-curdling wails. Has the crowd gathered to cheer for the winner, or are they just waiting to eat you for dinner? It's rare to find a book that combines my love of tabletop role-playing games, maps, and fantasy, but the writer's map from Thames and Hudson do just that. Edited by Hugh Lewis-Jones, the Atlas of Imaginary Lands starts out quite simple. Maps of only the best places we only ever get to visit from the comfort of an armchair with a nice cup of tea. Or whatever else it is that you want to drink and eat while you read. Detailed maps of Tolkien's Middle-earth, Neverland from Peter Pan. Basically, it's the ultimate whistle-stop tour of everywhere you wish you could go on holiday. On top of that, it shows some fantastic historical maps. Some of them are maps of what people think the world looked like, depictions of the 9 hells as described in Dante Alighieri's Dante's Inferno, the Divine Comedy, and fictional places even when map makers were just starting to get an idea of what fun they could have with the empty spaces in the corners of maps. But like anything from the first shelf, this isn't just for fun, it's also educational. The latter third of the book doesn't just show you how to draw maps detailing cartographical terms, tools, tricks and tips, but also how to read real-world maps, learning from fictional maps. It's also got advice for tabletop role-playing game fans, both writing up dungeon maps as well as how best to tout a life. Merlin, Morgana Le Fay, Nicholas and Perenelle Flamel, Agrippa, Edward Kelly, and Alistair Crowley. All very common names in the occult circles, but I'd like to take my time talking about my favourite occultist of history, and a true epic of a man who rarely gets a look in any historical documentary. During the reign of Henry VIII, Mary, and Queen Elizabeth I, one man who survived all 3 and was known to be a very credible and powerful astronomer, magician, necromancer, and quite frankly the darkest magic of all, maths. Dr. John Dee was an advisor throughout the courts of Europe, but is most famous as being a direct advisor to Queen Elizabeth I. During his time he had the largest private library in not just England but also Europe, no wonder he's my hero, and is famous for 2 things we see quite often. First is the Enochian alphabet, the alphabet of the angels, the devils, and in his theorising, even the fairies. But more importantly, he was the original 007. He was a spy, and he signed all his letters 007, 00 being the eyes of the Queen, and the 7 he took as his signature to John Dee.
I don't feel like being serious today. Let's find a funny one. This'll do. Tiny acts of rebellion. A list of little things you can do that can't get you in trouble, because they're probably not worth the police's time. Let's go for Act 32, present and unaccounted for. What greater social pressure is there than buying the perfect wedding or baby shower gift? It's all too much, I tell you. Much like failing an exam, if you feel you can't quite cut the mustard and get the perfect gift, why not just focus your energies on fucking up big time? Venture outside the norm of baby booties and 12-slice toasters and his and hers Facebook accounts. Here's some suggestions for weddings. A giant fist. A wooden block that says bird brain. A hand towel with a note that says, I'll get you the rest of the set if the marriage lasts. For her, matches, because he will steep the toilet up, and for him, matches, so he can burn down the flat for the insurance after she leaves him. A wiretapping kit. And here's some for baby showers. My baby's a future Birds on Society t-shirt. An Opus Dei baby leash complete with the first edition of the Da Vinci Code. Or a bib that says, my other baby is a Volvo. Other acts include going to someone else's bathroom and using some of their medication, making your own do not disturb signs at hotels, and stealing pens from banks.
Here's one for all of you who did that fingers down challenge surviving in a medieval fantasy. Let's see if you actually would survive in a medieval European country. The Time Traveller's Guide to Medieval England. This book is a fantastic resource for any TTRPG players who set mostly in medieval fantasy, high fantasy settings similar to Lord of the Rings, or Game of Thrones. It is also invaluable to anyone who writes in a high fantasy setting. The book is factual, with resources and advice, as well as reference material taken from reputable sources. It contains tables, texts, and graphs showing what the best food to eat, how much things cost, how much you can expect to make, and what it will be advisable to hunt, gather, or otherwise make yourself useful in a medieval England community. All wrapped up with a lovely flavour of comedy and satire that is just wonderful.
I'd like to read you all something. My dad and Uncle Jim looked white and shaky. My mum approached him. What's up, Len? Have the man sacked you? No, my Vi, it's much worse than that. Start packing the things, we've got to shift up out of here. Are you mad? What have you done, Len? I ain't done nothing. It's that man. He He wants to take Alfie off us. What? Mum was strangely quiet. did you just say? It's true, said Jim. He's come out to us and asked us if he could have your Alfie to keep, to bring him up. The men were running to fetch the horses. Our world had suddenly gone mad. Just as we were about to pull out into the snow, the farmer and his woman came to the gate, both pleading for us to think about what we were about to do. I'll look after him, the woman was trying to tell my man. Go get your own children, you aren't having mine. My man bore down on the farmer's wife until my dad grabbed hold of her and shoved her back up onto the wagon. It was a night that would haunt us for months to come. Any minute we expected the police to pull us up and take our Alfie from us. And all this time our poor Alfie was frightened to death. He and we others never understood what was really going on, but we knew that whatever it took, my mum and dad would protect us from any danger. We had deep trust in them. That sounds medieval or dystopian, doesn't it? A family frightened that the police were going to take their own baby away from them. But it's not medieval or a dystopia. It was the 1930s and a travelling Romany family. From that same book, there is a passage about the army men turning up and taking the men and then the horses, which were their only means of a livelihood, all being press-ganged into the army. According to The Guardian, 2 weeks ago, a group of gypsies fled a racist mob in Spain for fear of violence. This month, my husband heard someone at work say they were going to have to get the gyppos in to tarmac their drive. He was asked if he knew any. He replied, "Oh, just my baby, my wife, and my father-in-law." And rather than apologising or being contrite, this work colleague replied with, "Oh, do they do tarmacking?" I am Roma Gypsy. I can trace it back to Lord George Sanger's original head clown. And what's really depressing is that I read that news. I heard that story from my husband, and I just thought, yeah, that sounds about right. We're not the most marginalised group, but we're not really being recognised for the suffering that we deal with either. Within living memory, there have been heads of state refer to my people as vermin who need to be wiped off the face of the earth. Look, I'm not here to stand on a soapbox. I'd just like to read out a little poem from one of my books here. Never borned my son to carry a gun or shoot and kill a mother's son. So, I really like fairy tales. This isn't even really my full collection. This is just what I could narrow it down to. Basically by me being very severe about what counts as a fairy tale. We ended up deciding that things that use a fairy tale as a jumping off point but then tell a different story don't count. These are the 24 that we narrowed it down to, some of which have already had videos done about them and others of which I will go through with you all at a later date. I think I like fairy tales so much because they speak to a collective consciousness in humanity. For example, I know 5 different versions of Cinderella from various different cultures, all with the same broad strokes of rags to riches. And weirdly, most of them mention the slippers. Another reason why I love to collect fairy tale books is, of course, you tend to get the more beautiful illustrations in them. For example, these are my Foley copies of Snow Queen, its beautiful gilded glittering pages, Beauty and the Beast and various other French fairy tales. P.S. written by Perrault, not the Brothers Grimm. The thing about fairy tales is that so many things use them as a basis that it's very hard to find things in my shelves that don't have some connection to them, or I can at least make an argument towards them being a fairy story. Beyond the obvious ones of the Fables comic book series and Lost Girls, but you know what, I could probably talk for hours and hours about fairy tales and the things people think are fairy tales, so maybe I will at some point actually.
In a recent video I talked about one of my heroes, Dr. John Dee, the magician and astronomer of the Elizabethan courts. Well, on the other side of the world there was another Dee, celebrated cases of Judge Dee. Yes, in the 1700s, almost 200 years before Sherlock Holmes met paper, Judge Dee was appointed magistrate of Changping and went on to have many interesting cases and adventures that, if I was a conspiracy kind of man, I would say Sir Arthur Conan Doyle may have taken a lot of liberty or inspiration from. It's of course silly. The cases of Judge Dee didn't reach Western readers until the Pacific War, where it was translated. But the stories do have a lot of similarities to our dear Detective Sherlock Holmes. Judge Dee employs many tactics, including disguise and subterfuge, to work out who the guilty party is and punish them most appropriately. And if you love Chinese artwork, this book is full of it.
So if you've been watching our channel for any amount of time, you've probably noticed on the horror shelf there's a few Junji Itos. They're mine, I think he's a genius. But there's also these ones. These scary books are actually what first got me into Japanese horror. Picked up during my very weeby teenage phase. I'm not even going to attempt the name of the author because I'm going to butcher it. These are a bit of a weird one, because they're definitely scarier than, let's say, Goosebumps level, but nowhere near as weird as Tomi or Uzumaki, for example. It actually feels a lot like reading a manga version of Wes Craven's Scary Movie, playing a line somewhere between drama, comedy and horror. As in all horror, it's a little bit morality tale-y as well, particularly the one titled Faces, which does contain 2 stories rather than just the one. The artwork and style actually remind me rather a lot of watching a Japanese 80s horror movie. It's all very unique and stylised to itself. And while I do absolutely say that they are not as scary as a Junji Ito book, that's not to say there isn't stuff to be frightened of here. In all, good 80s horror vibes. Enough to make you shudder, but definitely not enough to keep you up at night. The King of the Copper Mountains is a book I totally didn't steal from my primary school's library. Technically speaking, they were getting rid of a load of old books and that was on the pile, and I knew no one else would appreciate it, so I just slipped it into my bag. That's not stealing, that's rescuing. Originally titled Het Slutelkruid, which I've probably just butchered, The King of the Copper Mountains won the Netherlands' Best Children's Book in the year it was published, 1964. It's an amazing, beautiful children's story. Sort of reminds me of Arabian Nights, but with more of a Nordic spin. The eponymous king, after a 1,000-year-long reign, is dying of his heart failing, and the only thing that will cure it is the medicine which the doctor who attends upon him goes to go and collect. To keep his heart beating for the few nights that he's away, the rabbit servant who attends upon the king calls upon all the animals of his kingdom to tell him exciting stories every night, all in hopes of keeping his heart beating just that extra night more. If you find yourself in the market for a children's book, I can't recommend this one enough. In fact, you really should do yourselves a favour and go get it. It's only about £6, and that's if you're looking for a really nice edition. And I'm just desperate for more people to have heard of this lovely, lovely story. As for stealing, sorry not sorry.